The report's highly critical of how underprepared authorities in regional Queensland were for the floods, especially in the Lockyer Valley, one of the worst hit areas. An inland tsunami swept through the city of Toowoomba, high in the ranges west of Brisbane, before roaring into the Lockyer Valley, where it swamped small communities and destroyed lives. The town of Grantham didn't stand a chance. 12 people were killed, and Paul Lockyer was one of the first reporters on the scene, which became the flood's ground zero. He's returned to Grantham to check how locals are faring 6 months later.
The coal trains again rattle over the bridge spanning the Sandy Creek in Grantham. In the surrounding paddocks on the rich floodplains, lettuce is being picked for market. And on a hill above the town, well removed from any future flood threat, a housing area is being marked out to build the new Grantham. But still dotted through the old town site are the haunting reminders of that fateful January afternoon when a flood of unimaginable size and force tore this community apart.
What happened here yesterday? Armageddon.
Kel Wood and other survivors of the disaster still find it difficult to comprehend what happened to their town.
Memories of the morning after are probably more poignant because just the devastation, the destruction, the visual destruction was just mind-boggling.
Kel Wood watched from the pub as the deadly floodwaters surged through the town, reducing a neighbouring house to rubble and carrying the 3 people who were sheltering there to their deaths. His wife, Michelle, was at home on the other side of the torrent. Both were trapped until deep into the night.
Close to hell and back, and we're slowly getting back. Everybody's getting back on track, and every day is a day closer to normality.
Where them stumps are there, that used to be my house.
Leroy Shepherd, who was swept away in his house with his family, filmed the entire catastrophic episode.
Man, I can feel the house moving. The house is collapsing. The house, we are moving.
That day has played havoc with your mindset. It's a scar on your head for the rest of your life, I think so.
In the immediate aftermath of the disaster, the survivors of Grantham were asking the question, why hadn't they received more warning? After all, they argued, the floodwaters had already covered some distance, carving out a path of destruction through a number of small communities in the Lockyer Valley before finally reaching here.
People got individual warnings from friends and relatives that were further up the valley, and that's luck of the draw. But it should have been done officially.
With all the access to media, computer, radio, there should have been warning.
They couldn't actually give you a definitive answer on something as simple as, well, should I stay or should I go?
Marty Warburton had to clamber onto the roof of his service station to escape the rising floodwaters. He watched as helicopter crews plucked people from rooftops until darkness left others stranded.
When the sun went down here Monday night, we were left for dead. And my opinion hasn't changed, so I still feel the same way.
Marty Warburton claims that a warning phone call was made from a family at Postman's Ridge to the local council, urging evacuation of communities downstream, but it wasn't passed on.
If that phone call had been made and received here, they would have had enough time to door knock everybody in the Grantham Ground Zero area by foot, basically.
You might have had an hour, maybe. But you can do a lot of things in an hour, you know. A lot of people could have got out of the houses, up to higher ground, got vehicles out, animals, you know. A lot of things could happen in an hour.
Then it was revealed that no disaster management plan was in place for the area. The Lockyer Valley Regional Council was in the throes of putting it together when the flood hit.
To not actually have a disaster plan at all seems fairly ludicrous, really.
The council has defended its response to the emergency, rejecting accusations that it was unprepared and overwhelmed. And it has its sympathisers amongst those who lived through the ordeal.
no disaster plan could have foreseen that event, could have saved any lives. No disaster plan could have prevented something of this magnitude.
How far would the disaster plan have to go? Has anybody ever had any disaster of this type in this part of Australia? No.
Derek Schultz's farm was covered with much of the debris that was swept out of Grantham. He's now worried that planning to cope with future floods could be lost in a blame game.
People are looking for someone to blame, yes, and you can appreciate that, but I don't know, can you blame the council? Can you blame the state government? Can you blame ourselves for not sort of being more proactive? Who do you blame?
The Bureau of Meteorology can be added to that list. Its warning systems have come under close scrutiny, especially since it disregarded its readings when the flood poured over the Helidon Bridge just upstream from Grantham, believing that the monitors were faulty.
Basically, they should have got the word out to the authorities of what was happening.
I'm sure lives would have been saved if the Bureau of Meteorology had told us, and they knew that this was happening, but they ignored their own warnings. They failed to believe their own warnings, height levels in creeks further up.
There's one common plea from the survivors of Grantham: for a reliable warning system to be established to ensure there can be no repetition of one of Australia's greatest natural disasters.
Any warning's better than none at all, I suppose.
Well, I think we could all save them millions of dollars by telling them that we just needed more warning.
You know, lives would have been saved if we had just had communication.